Good morning. I am Debbie Brown, and I am the worship associate for today. As there are no announcements this morning, let us settle ourselves for this morning's service. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany, also known as Albany UU. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those who are visiting with us this morning, whether in person or online. We aspire to be a beloved community, open and welcoming to all. If you'd like to know more about our congregation, please join us after our service for refreshments and conversation, and you can also check out our welcome table in the lobby. This morning, we welcome to our pulpit Peter Brown. Peter and I are lifelong Unitarian Universalists. We met at the end of our first year in college because of our individual involvements in liberal religious youth groups. We each have had a number of roles in this congregation over the years, but today it is an honor to lead this service. Now, please turn off your electronic devices, and I invite you to briefly say hello to someone near you. And if you're on Zoom, you're welcome to unmute briefly to greet others online. Let's pause our conversations here and come back together. Our prelude is La Marseillaise, composed by Charles Joseph Rouget de Lille, shared by Veronica Allen. What life have we if we have not life together? There is no life not lived in community, and no community not lived in celebration and praise. Our opening hymn is 1021 in the Teal hymnal, Lean on Me. Please rise in body or spirit. Each week when we gather, we light a chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Please join with me in saying our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Good morning. My name is Randy Rosette, and I am one of the pastoral care associates who work with our minister, Reverend Ann, to provide spiritual care in this congregation. If there's something going on for you, please reach out to me or one of the other pastoral care associates. We care, we want to hear what's going on in your life.
Here in Religious Community, we take this time in our service to notice and honor the joys and sorrows that each of us carries in our hearts as we are present to each other and to what is good and hard in our lives.
The reading this morning is excerpted from My Parting Prescription for America, written by Dr. Vivek Halagiri Murthy, Surgeon General of the United States for 2 presidents. Without community, it is hard to feel whole. Why? Because community is a powerful source of life satisfaction and life expectancy. It's where we know each other, help each other, and find purpose in contributing to each other's lives. These are clear, consistent, and time-tested calls to cultivate community for our individual and collective well-being. So, what makes community possible? 3 core elements: relationships, service, and purpose. And 1 core virtue, love. Together, they create the ecosystem of meaning and belonging that are essential for fulfillment. Relationships are the connections we build with friends, family, neighbors, co-workers, and others we encounter. Healthy relationships, where we feel seen and where we can be ourselves, can be powerful sources of joy and support, and can be buffers to stress. They can improve our performance at work and school and help us make sense of the world as we process our lives with one another. Building our relationships with one another requires the commitment to make social connection a priority and the courage to be vulnerable and real with each other. Service constitutes the actions we take that benefit others. This can be regular volunteering for a community organization or school program, or participation in national service organizations. But service can also be small acts of kindness towards someone we know or a stranger. Service can help build the skills, character, and dispositions to be effective in the workplace and in civic life. Purpose is the feeling of having an overarching life aim that guides and prioritizes our decisions and actions. It is not what we do, it's why we do it. It's not our goals or achievements, but our reasons for them. Having a strong sense of purpose helps prioritize our decisions about how we spend our time, our energy, and our resources, and how we think about our short-term goals. When people have a strong sense of purpose, we invest more in one another and are more committed to each other. This, in turn, strengthens our community. To build community requires love. Love not as sentimentality, but as a commanding force with the power to build, strengthen, and heal. Love as generosity and kindness, love as hope and grace, love as courage.
Hi. Thanks for coming. Murthy obviously had a concern, and that's why he took his last opportunity to speak to us about the problem he saw of community. Our UU values include, among other things, justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all feel welcome and can thrive. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Equity. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. But how do we achieve that when all around us we find discord in the community to the point of violence? And how do we get to be so discordant? Groundhog Day is one of my favorite movies. Most of you have probably seen it. If you haven't, the crucial details are Bill Murray is sent by a TV network to a town in Pennsylvania to cover whether the groundhog sees his shadow. Somehow he gets caught in a time loop, and he keeps waking up to the same radio station and replays the day over and over. Initially, he's amazed, then panicked, then terrified, and then finally, he decides to make the best of it. And he begins improving himself and then improving the lives of those around him. Since he knows what's going to happen before it does, he can prevent or mitigate bad things such as accidents and health problems. And in the end, this decision to improve the community gets him out of the trap. Of course, there's much more to it. A student once asked Margaret Mead what the first signs of community were. And she replied, the discovery of a many thousands of year old femur, broken human femur, which had healed, was the first sign. Without community support, the person who suffered that break would not have been able to survive long enough for it to heal. Why do I point this out? Because community support, equity, and generosity or charity have been crucial to our development into the creatures we are today. If we look, there are many other pieces of evidence showing charity has been essential to the creation of our human species. Community, or what's known as social capital, has been dramatically degraded over the last 75 years. Our U.S. Constitution specifically calls for promoting the general welfare. Today, our society seems to be retreating from many types of actions which promote the general welfare. What is happening? In every democracy, there is a tension between two crucial themes of human existence: liberty and equality. If we are perfectly liberated, there's no equality. And if we're perfectly equal, there is no liberty. So, many democracies have created a balancing process to achieve a modicum of each. The French motto, liberty, equality, fraternity, is a good example of a clear statement in that direction. Achieving a cohesive society requires creation of a system which achieves this balancing act and stimulates a belief in the well-being of the citizenry. Both our religious society and our nation say they are dedicated to this objective. Community cohesion or adequate social capital is essential to this result. Social capital has been discussed for over a century with varying degrees of understanding and valuation. Social capital is what is generated when we come together to church or to interact with other people who share our philosophy of life, but have no other necessary connection. It also is generated when we participate in all manner of connections from Rotary and Kiwanis to Little League, volunteer fire companies, garden clubs, bowling leagues, and practically every other organization you can imagine, which brings people who are not otherwise connected together. The social sciences try to make sense of our connections to each other from varied points of view. Economics puts a numerical value on our efforts to connect. Economists are helpful in considering the availability of social capital because they quantify aspects of our social interactions and connections by deducing and explaining the value of our relations with each other. Technically, economics is the study of the production, distribution, and value of goods and services, but these are all things that we get from someone else. One economist, Robert Putnam, now at Harvard but previously at the University of Michigan, has made great contribution to our understanding of social capital. Putnam and his colleagues have been studying it for close to 50 years, and Putnam's work, Bowling Alone, and his more recent work, The Upswing, How America Came Together a Century Ago and How We Can Do It Again, have been particularly influential. In Bowling Alone, now some 25 years old, he documented the decrease in our social connections beginning most dramatically around 1954. Social organizations of all types, from churches to bowling leagues and everything in between, lost significant membership in this period. The causes are probably multiple, but one major factor seems to have been the advent of television, which let us get our social interaction at home in front of the tube, not actually a tube anymore. In retrospect, this loss of social connection was probably pretty important. In The Upswing, he provides significant evidence of 125-year cycle from the Gilded Age of the late 18th and early 1900s to today. The cycle, which is associated, he calls the I, we, I cycle. Last week, our speaker talked about the I, we juxtaposition. From the early part of the last century to today, he charts the rise to about 1967 and decline thereafter of several measures of communitarianism. The measures he chooses are economic inequality, political polarization, societal fragmentation, and cultural narcissism. He also looks at racial and gender equality. In each case, he documents a similar rise and then decline in these factors. The graphs he shows are remarkable in their consistency. There isn't time this morning, nor is it the purpose of our service, to consider all Putnam has to say. In brief, he documents a rise in community spirit and by inference in social capital from the beginning of the last century until the late 1960s. Just after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the curve begins to bend back down and continues the trend until at least the 2020s. His conclusion is the decline in community spirit, which has brought us to the point where violence has replaced discourse and political opponents see each other as evil, has been the logical outcome of overreach by some and fear of the loss of historic position by others. He even begins to think the loss of social capital isn't as much of a cause as he previously might have determined. There's a lot more in the book if you are interested. He calls it a book he had not intended to write until he found such compelling data. Historians now generally conclude the change he documents has been a shift to self over society. It is perhaps unwitting rejection of those historic threads which bound us together to create a whole greater than the sum of our parts. The Vietnam War, Watergate and its failure of honesty, the failure of the civil rights efforts, the divide created when the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were passed, the demands by more well-to-do to avoid paying high taxes, and other triggers turned wide swaths of the American public away from trust in government and other social arrangements which had been crucial in the rise of our special society. As these bonds began to unravel, the usual protections created by knowing each other and seeing each other in non-confrontational situations significantly disappeared. The dramatic growth in the value of the individual, me, over the community, we, can be witnessed in many ways. The data tells us the swing away from community has encouraged a shift in political power. Our current president and Congress are examples of the ascendancy of the me orientation. Since the election of Ronald Reagan, the candidate which best typified the swing to enhanced personal well-being has generally been the victor. In prior eras, we had the wealth of previously generated social capital to mitigate the swing toward liberty and away from equality. We knew firsthand the suffering of our fellow citizens, and it was pretty hard to demand our personal welfare transcend the community when we could see firsthand how it would affect others. People who championed the underdog were well received. As our connections have diminished, so also has our willingness to accept the importance of maintaining the welfare of others. So what's to be done? As in all things, the first step is to recognize the problem and decide on a way to attack it. If we believe in the values of our denomination, which together create a cohesive, supportive society, we need to figure out how to recover some of the communitarianism, as Putnam calls it, the interdependence, justice, and equity in our values. Well, let's work on a way to recover some of what we've lost. One of the problems of dealing with this topic is as soon as you start researching, you find critics who downplay the whole concept, and conservative groups which want to assert social capital cause as a way to advance topics often thought of as conservative initiatives, child care tax credits instead of child care services, family strengthening concepts, not community integration, which might be good in themselves, but do not really speak to the serious issue of reestablishing our sense of community. The basic issue is how to recover the sense of we and the social connection which built the consensuses that allowed the passage of the Voting Rights Act, something we'd be unlikely to see today. In this context, building social capital still seems a valuable starting point. Finding any other starting point seems even more daunting, if not impossible. The organization Purpose-Built Communities has actively worked in communities, especially in Georgia, to create greater social capital. Their website says, our model strengthens neighborhoods through mixed income housing, education, health and wellness, economic mobility, led by local nonprofit organizations called the Community Quarterback Organization. Embedded in this approach is a focus on building social capital between the people who live in the neighborhoods we are invited to work. That may not be a complete plan, but it could be a really good beginning. The Clapham group, whose roots begin with Hannah More and William Wilberforce, who were aggressive anti-slavery advocates of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, are pursuing the Social Capital Campaign. They've been working to generate appreciation of social capital in Washington and in communities which are interested. There's an international social capital association founded in New Zealand, but having a truly international membership. It was founded in 2021 and has announced its first conference on this topic in Dubai, the 25th, 28th of next year. Just over 2 years ago, none other than Forbes magazine called social capital your most valuable asset. When was the last time you heard Forbes mentioned from this pulpit? Anyway, the real point is the value of social capital has been widely appreciated. Moreover, the Forbes author identified several specific techniques for building social capital, such as thinking about what you can offer, not what you can get, being genuine, learning your team and creating safe spaces for communication. In several cases, organizations which work with businesses to improve results have begun to identify social capital as an important factor in business enhancement. That should encourage us to think the concept can be expanded to the entire community. There have been a number of articles and similar initiatives to encourage social capital creation. Debbie and I have belonged to Rotary for some time, and our club adopted social capital creation as one of its purposes. Just maintaining the viability of the club in the face of major losses in membership across all organizations is a way to develop social capital. In addition, the club has begun working across organizational lines to bring other organizations into projects and discussions. The University of Minnesota Extension Service has been promoting social capital as part of their work helping communities to develop better cohesiveness and economic development. Here's part of what they say about building our now favorite objective. To get you started, offer to mow a neighbor's lawn, volunteer to serve on a committee, hold lunchtime discussions at your workplace, organize community garden, sing in a choir, or have a neighborhood barbecue. See that? Sing in a choir. Bringing our neighbors together for fun and understanding enhances our commitment to compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth. Just as our annual goods and services auction brings us together, or our circle dinners, or activities such as P's and Q's or young adults. Our Saturday morning breakfasts and our work at Sheridan Prep move our efforts directly into the community. Keeping the importance of building community or social capital in these activities will help to improve the transference of these activities into larger objectives and results. If we expand our horizons and think about these same types of efforts on a different plane and a different scale, we will begin to encourage the connections which can rebuild our sense of community. I can't finish without mentioning one more local effort which seems to me destined to create a new way to revitalize our community and build understanding. Now, I've had the good fortune to be a part of a group dedicated to creating a waterway through downtown Albany. You can see the vision at albanywaterway.org. When this comes to fruition, it will restore the vitality of our now quiescent municipal center. If you've ever been to San Antonio, you will realize how a waterway can attract people. Schenectady, Syracuse, Buffalo have already proven again the effectiveness of this approach. Albany, the core of the state of empire, can outshine those precursors. Community action and recognition of the value of coming to know our neighbors for social and spiritual reasons are the keys to rebuilding our sense of community, our progressive orientation, and our valuation of that old standby charity. Changing ourselves is the beginning to changing the world. And that is what our principles call on us to do. Try it this week. Extend yourself. See what you can do to increase community connections in your community. We'll all be glad you did.